Hello there. So somebody commented and wanted me to talk about my career, and I'm going to go a little further and talk about basically most of my work history. If you want to support me or the channel, the information is in the description for Cashapp, PayPal, and Venmo. Do not feel obligated, but it's appreciated. So I'm going to ignore the first couple of jobs like, cashier at CVS and things like that. So when I was 20, I applied for a loss control agent at Kmart. This is 2000. Yeah, this is 2000. So I had no experience. I applied for a loss control agent at the Kmart in Ontario, the one on 4th Street. And I got an interview. I explained to the guy that I knew nothing about it, but out of photographic memory, I was somewhat intelligent and that I'd give it my all, and I knew what a loss control agent did. And I had worked as a security guard for a few months, so I had some basic security experience, even though that's really not what loss prevention's about. A lot of people think that retail loss prevention is security, and it's not. So the guy who was hiring was really really cool, and he liked me. We both smiled a lot. And at the end of the interview, he told me, "All right, well, I'll let you know if you got the job." I was like, "All right, cool." So I'm walking out, and I didn't even make it to the front door, and he came running after me and said, "I'm sorry, man, you got the job. Just please stay as eager as you are." And I said, "Yeah, of course." So basically, a loss control agent does audits of merchandise, makes sure the merchandise has EAS tags, which is electronic article surveillance. So it sets off the sensor-matic pillars at the door, so it beeps. Um, yeah, it does audits, checks things like that. Maybe we'll put up new video cameras. And the big thing that they do is catch shoplifters. So I went through all the training, watched these 1980s videos, which were pretty funny. And my boss basically told me what to look for, besides, what the information, besides going through the information in the handbook. And I think it was basically a month before you were allowed to catch a shoplifter. And I think the first two you caught had to be supervised. So, I did all the paperwork and I saw them catch a few shoplifters, so I knew what to look for. And I remember the first shoplifter I caught was a middle-aged Mexican man, and he was stealing corn removers for your feet. And I remembered just watching him in the health and beauty section, and it was like something clicked in my brain. Like I had done this in another life. And I knew exactly what to do. I knew all the little things that a shoplifter would do that would kind of give themselves away, even when they walk in the store. I just knew. It was very weird. And I started catching shoplifters like crazy. I became number one in my district about a year and a half later. And that is, in our store, we only had one other agent and a manager. And we were beating inner cities LA, where they had 5 agents and 1 manager. So basically, I was catching shoplifters like crazy. And it wasn't the obvious ones like gang members and like people that are probably going to be in there to steal. I'm talking about soccer moms, old men, old ladies, people that you wouldn't guess it. Like, I could feel it, I could see it, and I just knew who was going to steal. To this day, it's still very, very weird. Like I said, it was like I did it in another life. So I quickly moved up and I became a manager. And when you're a manager, you have your own store and your main focus is catching employees. See, a company loses a retail company like Walmart, Kmart, Marshalls, whatever, loses 70% of their money earned. 70% of their loss is from internal theft. That's employees stealing. 20% is to external theft like shoplifters, and 10% is to paperwork errors, inventory errors, that sort of thing. So they gave me my own store, and quickly I caught an employee, and I had to manage an agent, which was pretty cool. And then I moved up again, and they gave me a harder store because the first store they give you is kind of like a store where not a whole lot of action happens. Maybe they'd put you in a nice area where there's not a whole lot of theft, that kind of thing. So they sent me to Hesperia, which was pretty bad. So I did very, very well. Um, Started catching employees like crazy. I had a couple of good agents, and my boss moved me to Valencia, which I didn't want to move to. So now I had a crazy drive from Upland to Valencia. And my boss, who I really liked, ended up there was a redistricting. So he wasn't my boss anymore, and I got some young hotshot who was, a jerk. So I one day I kind of bragged to my dad, explaining that I was number one in my district and I found something that I'm really really good at. And he told me, "Well, that's good, but your job involves ruining someone's day." He said, "Whether they're right or wrong, and most of the time they're wrong, your job is ruining someone's day. Is that what you want to do for a living?" And I thought about it, and no, that's not what I want to do for a living. So, dealing with that drive and what my father said, I ended up quitting that job. My father was a really cool guy. He wasn't a disciplinarian or strict. He was like a philosopher. So I had a philosopher for a dad. So after that, I had a job that a friend gave me where I was an administrative assistant for a telecommunications company. And that was okay. I did that for a few months. And in the meantime, I had an eBay account that I was just kind of screwing around with. I was just having fun, finding things at thrift stores and reselling them. And this is before smartphones were big, so I had to memorize everything. A lot of it was common sense, like finding a camera for $5 at a yard sale, and you know that it works. Well, you're going to sell it for a lot more than $5 on eBay, so you can make money that way. So I started doing that as a little side gig, and I became pretty good at it. So I left the job as an administrative assistant, and I worked for a company that sold tools, doing eBay for them. Stayed there for a while, and basically the next few jobs I had was managing eBay accounts for large companies. I did it for a high-end antique store in Pasadena, which was great. I learned a lot of things. She was very intelligent. She taught me a lot about 1920s antiques. I did it for a place that bought and sold pallets, like from Amazon or Costco. So we'd get pallets of returns, and I'd have to make sure that the employees listed it and that kind of thing. So after I stopped running eBay for companies, I got a little bored because I never really got paid what I wanted to get paid, and I could show them, look, this is before I came, and this is what happened when I got here. I just want a small percent of this money that just came here, so you realize you're not going to feel it because I'm the one that brought all this money, and they'd never really give it to me, or they'd give me half of what I'm asking for. So I started to get annoyed with that. There's an old saying, you're never going to get too far working for the other guy. And that's true. So I also, from there, God, I did a lot of little things. I worked at a dispensary doing marketing for him. So there was a thing called Weed Maps, and I noticed the pictures that were on there, it just looked bad, and there was really bad descriptions. So I took professional photos of all the different types of marijuana this guy had, or all the edibles he had, and I put it on Weed Maps, put descriptions, plastered him all over Craigslist, which he didn't have any Craigslist exposure. And I started calling everybody on his phone and saying, "Hey, I noticed that you haven't called in a few weeks. Did we do something wrong, or did you find a different dispensary? Well, what can we do to make that better?" And the man started making quite a lot of money. He started doing a lot better than what he was. And like everything, you start to get bored. So I left that job, and this is right around the time that my dad started not doing very well and he was dying. So I was a bit lost. I didn't know what to do. I had a little bit of money coming in from my eBay account, and I decided to drive a cab. I figured it'd be cool to drive because driving always kind of helped me with depression and that kind of thing. And with this specific cab company, they did government subsidized calls. So a lot of the calls were driving old ladies to from point A to point B, or taking people to doctor's appointments or dentist appointments or mental health appointments. And sometimes I would take people to dialysis, which is something that really affected me and still affects me to this day. In dialysis clinics, you just see a lot of people who just seem like they don't have any more life in them. Like they're just taking like one day at a time. They're just in so much mental and physical pain. And because of that, that's one of my big fears, is ending up on dialysis. So I worked as a cab driver for a while. And yeah, it was cool. I met a lot of cool people, helped a lot of people. It was kind of it was a feel-good job. Now I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. In 2006, so this is when I was around the time that I was working for the first place that I managed an eBay account for, I got really heavy into photography. I've always wanted to be into photography, but I didn't know how, so I just started reading books. I read about a book a day. I'd go to Borders every day and buy a new book. And then I would go online and I'd read on the forums, and I ended up becoming friends with somebody who's really heavy into photography, so that helped. So around 2006, I figured that I was good enough because I was bringing my camera with me everywhere, taking pictures of my friends and family and doing street photography. And so I started putting ads on Craigslist. I remember I had a marketing background a bit, so I basically took over Craigslist and, started putting wedding photography ads and portrait photography. And it did very well. I remember my first gig, somebody posted on Craigslist, "I want somebody to photograph my daughter, my newborn daughter. Please send in submissions. I want to pay no more than $300 for an hour of photography, and we want all the images." So I sent some of the photos I did, and they hired me. And I got $300 for an hour of photography. I mean, most people didn't make that in a few days back then, so it was pretty cool, and it was cash. So I did wedding photography. I took over Craigslist, like I said, and I was doing sometimes 3 to 5 weddings a month. And it was more than enough to live off of. I had a lot of free time, and with my free time, I'd go to Venice Beach and do street photography, which I really, really loved. Or I'd photograph friends. I did nudes a lot, so I'd photograph some of my friends nude, or my friends' friends, or people that posted they wanted nude photos done for their husband. So nudes and street photography I did quite a lot of, and that was more of my personal thing that I liked a lot. So if I had to say what I do for a living, it's photography and eBay. I also sell vintage photographic equipment that I find at thrift stores and yard sales and that kind of thing. My website is therealpetergeo.com, and that's a lot of my personal work, so nudes and street photography. And there's a link to wedding photography, and that'll take you to another site, which is called queenmaryweddingphotography.com or queenmaryweddingphotographer.com. I bought them both. And the reason why is I photographed a wedding on the Queen Mary, which I love the Queen Mary very, very much, once. And I wish I could be their resident wedding photographer. Matter of fact, I love the Queen Mary so much. I tried to get a job at the Queen Mary like starting year 2000. I would send a bunch of resumes via fax, via email, through snail mail. I'd find out who HR was, who the director of the ship was, and I never got an interview for nothing I ever, for all the things I applied for. I never got an interview. So I figured I would just let people know that, like, if they want a wedding photographer and they're getting married at the Queen Mary, I would be the guy to be. At least that's the impression that I'm trying to give. So that's the reason why I bought those two domains. I have somebody else do that for me. I used to be able to do it myself, but with the strokes, it's kind of hard to concentrate and do things. So I have a friend who's taking care of that for me. So there's not a whole ton of photos on either site, but there's quite a few. But I have so much more wedding photography and personal photography than what you see. So I guess that's basically it, huh? I still do photography. The last wedding I did was in November. I did a very good job. It was like I had never stopped doing it, but it was difficult. I had to take an extra dose of pain pills, and I stayed in bed for a couple days. I didn't do much. I was sore. My body hurt. Um, 1 second. As for personal photography, basically I just photograph my son all the time. I used to love street photography a lot, but after my second divorce, it was like I couldn't see the photos anymore. Or if I saw them, I wouldn't pull the trigger. It was really weird. So basically, I just stopped doing street photography. I even published my own book, a street photography book. That was back in 2007. And a lot of the photos I look at, it's like, wow, I was pretty good at this. And sometimes when I go to Chinatown or Venice Beach, I'll bring my camera, but I end up really not taking any pictures. I like photographing people. I don't like landscapes. That seems boring. Everybody's photographed, Monument Valley or Mono Lake or Grand Canyon. So I just don't see any point of it. I like photographing people a lot. I love doing portraits, and there's just something about freezing a moment and being able to have like a picture of that. I don't know. That just kind of blows me away. When I first got into photography, and I met that guy who was as passionate about photography as I was. I mean, I went to bed thinking about photography. I woke up thinking about photography. I carried my cameras all the time in case we'd run into a model or I'd see an accident or something like that. I love photography so much and still do. I collect cameras. I buy and sell cameras. I've never gotten into videography, so that's the reason why the videos that I'm doing aren't that great. Um, yeah, but I'd be okay doing what the heck happened here. I'm so sorry about that. I hit play on a YouTube video. So yeah, that's basically it. The last thing I did with my life is photography and eBay, which I still do, but I really haven't gotten a whole lot of wedding work where I am at. Yeah, so I hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any questions, post them in the comments and I'll answer. I pretty much get back to everybody who comments. Thank you for watching and have a good one.